It was a quiet morning in Memphis, Tennessee, until a chilling crime rattled the community. A young mother was taken right outside her former in-law's house, and although few heard her scream, the entire neighborhood felt the shock of her disappearance. Shannon Sanderson, a 25-year-old woman with 3 children, had spent the night before a casino in Tunica County, Mississippi, an area known as one of the largest casino hubs in the United States. On April 19, 1996, she had what many would call a lucky streak. Starting with just $500 at the blackjack table, Shannon walked away with a whopping $5,000 in winnings. At around 3:30 a.m., she cashed out her chips and left the casino. A security guard accompanied her to her car at her request, a common safety measure for winners walking out with large sums of money. She then drove back to Memphis, a trip that took about an hour and led her down some quiet, dimly lit back roads. Earlier that evening, she had dropped her 3 children off at their grandparents' house, her ex-husband's parents, so she could enjoy the night celebrating her new husband's birthday. Shannon's new husband was much older and extremely wealthy, a man she had met while working for his company. By 4:45 a.m., Shannon returned to pick up the kids. They had school that morning, and she wanted to make sure they got there on time. But before she could step inside the house, something terrible happened. A scream echoed through the early dawn, waking her ex-in-laws. Her former father-in-law rushed to the window and saw Shannon struggling with a man wearing a red baseball cap. He dashed outside, but it was too late. Neighbors also heard the commotion. In mere seconds, Shannon was forced into a car and driven away, just 15 meters from the front door. Local police responded quickly after the grandfather dialed 911. They arrived within minutes and began gathering statements. Witnesses described the car as possibly a dark sports model, though some were convinced it was a reddish-brown Chevy Beretta. Due to the darkness, no one got a clear look at the driver's face. However, investigators found 2 mail buttons and a pink artificial fingernail near the driveway, likely torn from Shannon's clothes during the struggle. Despite a quick response and numerous leads, Shannon had vanished without a trace. As daylight broke over Memphis, police intensified their investigation into Shannon's sudden disappearance. They started by speaking to the people closest to her, hoping someone had seen or heard something helpful. Shannon's ex-husband was among the first to be questioned. He told investigators that he had been at work the entire night and hadn't seen or spoken to Shannon since she dropped the kids off. Despite their past differences and eventual divorce, they had been married for nearly 8 years and still shared parenting responsibilities. According to him, their relationship had remained civil, especially for the sake of their children. Even though he seemed to have a solid alibi, detectives weren't ready to completely rule him out. Divorces can leave deep emotions, and they couldn't ignore the possibility of lingering resentment, especially since he was still paying child support, despite Shannon marrying a man of significant wealth. Naturally, the next person on the list was Shannon's current husband. Not only was he a prominent businessman who owned a large security firm, but he was also extremely well known in the area. Some wondered if Shannon's abduction had been a targeted act, possibly even a ransom situation, considering her husband's financial status. But oddly, no ransom note ever came. He told police he had been devastated since hearing the news of Shannon's kidnapping. The night of the incident, he had been celebrating his 58th birthday with his daughters from a previous marriage. Shannon had planned to pick him up and take him to the casino to continue the celebration, but when she called, he said he wasn't ready yet. She was upset. From her perspective, he was putting his daughters ahead of their plans. The call ended abruptly, and she never answered his return calls. When asked if he had any idea who might want to hurt his wife, he brought up a disturbing detail. Shannon had filed a harassment complaint against an ex-boyfriend about a year earlier. According to her husband, this ex drove a Chevy Beretta, the same type of car that had been mentioned by witnesses. Investigators quickly pulled DMV records, but found no registered Beretta under the ex-boyfriend's name or anyone close to him. However, the man did have a restraining order filed against him by Shannon, which meant he was certainly someone worth questioning. But when police tried to track him down, he was neither at his home nor his workplace. The search continued. Officers canvassed a neighborhood near the crime scene, hoping someone had seen that suspicious vehicle again. It paid off when they spoke with the suspect's sister, who lived just a few blocks from where Shannon had been taken. She recalled seeing a reddish-brown Chevy Beretta speeding away around the same time Shannon was abducted. Initially, she didn't recognize the driver, but after watching the news and seeing Shannon's husband's face, she became convinced he was the man behind the wheel. At this point, detectives began to wonder if this crime was less about money and more about personal motives. Shannon's connection to a wealthy, older husband may have made her a target in more ways than one. They brought her husband back in for a formal interview, and this time he was accompanied by a lawyer. During the formal police interview, Shannon's husband opened up about their relationship. He admitted things hadn't always been perfect between them. Their romance had started while she was still working at his company and going through her divorce. It wasn't long before things turned serious, and the two tied the knot. But not long after the wedding, issues began to surface. To protect both their interests, they drafted a prenuptial agreement just 10 days before Shannon disappeared. Interestingly, her husband claimed it was Shannon's idea. She wanted clarity about custody for her children and financial boundaries, so they decided to keep separate bank accounts. According to him, money had nothing to do with their arguments. Detectives asked if he'd be willing to take a lie detector test to clear his name. Initially, he agreed, but shortly after, he backed out on the advice of his attorney, claiming his heart medication might interfere with the results. This raised eyebrows among the investigators. If he truly had nothing to hide, why avoid the test? Despite their growing suspicions, the case wasn't moving forward. Days passed, and still no trace of Shannon. As time dragged on, local authorities began to worry. Every hour that passed without finding Shannon reduced the chances of bringing her home alive. Then, 2 weeks after the abduction, police in Mississippi got a call from a woman who believed her husband might be connected to the crime. She had seen the news report describing the getaway car and realized it looked exactly like her husband's red Chevy Beretta. The detail that stuck out most? He had been wearing a red baseball cap the very next day, the same item witnesses remembered seeing during the kidnapping. She also mentioned something else unsettling. That night, her husband came home with a cut on his arm and blood on his shirt. He claimed he'd had a fall at the casino. She wasn't sure she believed him, but she let it go until the story broke on TV. Investigators were intrigued. Was this just a coincidence or the break they desperately needed? They asked the woman to notify them as soon as her husband returned home. Meanwhile, more tips poured in, most of them dead ends. One man swore he saw Shannon working at another casino, but that lead quickly proved false. These false alarms only added to the growing frustration among detectives. And then came a discovery no one wanted. On May 9, 1996, just over 2 weeks after Shannon vanished, two people exploring a property in rural DeSoto County, Mississippi, stumbled upon something disturbing. As they walked the land, a foul smell caught their attention. Following the odor, they discovered a woman's decomposing body near a secluded area. Law enforcement quickly arrived and sealed off the scene. The remains were found in an isolated spot near the woods. Not far from the body, investigators recovered 2 high-heeled shoes, a jacket with metallic buttons, and pink artificial fingernails. These items match what Shannon was last seen wearing. However, the level of decomposition made it impossible to identify the body on site. To confirm the identity, the medical examiner compared dental records and took x-rays. There was also a tattoo above the victim's heart that read, "I love you, Robert," a tattoo Shannon Sanderson was known to have. The confirmation came shortly after the body was hers. The official autopsy revealed she had been shot in the right temple with a .22 caliber weapon. Based on the condition of the body, she had been dead for at least 1 to 2 weeks, likely killed soon after her abduction. With the discovery of Shannon's body, what began as a missing persons case had now escalated into a full-scale homicide investigation. Back in Memphis, District Attorney Jerry Kitchen was briefed on the update. While the news brought a sense of closure to the family, it also opened a floodgate of new questions. The list of suspects remained long, each one with potential motives, but little concrete evidence tying them to the crime. To help unravel this complex web, the Memphis police reached out to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation and the FBI for support. The fact that Shannon's body was found in another state only complicated things further, making it a federal matter. Special Agent Jennifer Akin from the FBI's Memphis division stepped in to assist. She had extensive experience with interstate cases and knew this one wouldn't be simple. There were multiple agencies involved, a long list of persons of interest, and a public growing increasingly anxious about the possibility of a killer still on the loose. As authorities revisited interviews and reevaluated earlier statements, they also began conducting lie detector tests to eliminate suspects. One by one, Shannon's ex-boyfriends and close acquaintances were asked about their whereabouts during the time of the murder. All of them denied any involvement, and so far, no one failed the polygraph exams. Still, one vehicle kept popping up in witness accounts, a reddish-brown Chevy Beretta. The car had been seen at the scene of the abduction, and now, someone remembered spotting a similar car near the area where Shannon's body had been found. The story was about to take another sharp turn. This time, almost 800 miles away from the original crime scene. On May 22, 1996, a major development took place far from Memphis, nearly 1,200 kilometers away in Laredo, Texas, near the Mexican border. Border Patrol agents spotted a red Chevy Beretta behaving suspiciously. Just as the vehicle neared a checkpoint, the driver made an abrupt turn, trying to avoid it. Officers immediately gave chase. The car was forced into a dead end, and the driver didn't go down without a fight. He resisted arrest until one of the officers drew a firearm and demanded compliance. Once detained, the man identified himself as Gerald Lee Powers. He didn't have a driver's license on him, but authorities were able to confirm his identity through additional records. Inside the trunk of his car, officers discovered something alarming: a stolen firearm reported missing in Arkansas. That raised immediate red flags. Even more concerning, the car he was driving was registered to his wife, Shannon Powers, and matched the vehicle description linked to Shannon Sanderson's abduction and murder. At this point, the FBI stepped in. Special Agent Evan Ray, stationed in Laredo, was brought in to conduct a full investigation of the vehicle. Ray knew that attacking a federal officer was a serious offense, but once he connected Gerald to the case in Memphis, things escalated further. The car underwent a thorough forensic inspection. Although it had clearly been cleaned recently, agents were determined to find anything that could tie Gerald Powers to the crime. In a stroke of improvisation, Agent Ray used a lint roller, yes, a basic office lint roller, to collect trace fibers and hairs from the interior since proper forensic tools weren't immediately available. And then came a crucial find: a single pink artificial fingernail lodged in the back footwell. Investigators knew this detail mattered. Shannon had been wearing pink nails the night she was taken, and earlier, one had been found near the scene of her abduction. Now, another had turned up inside the suspect's vehicle, direct evidence that could finally tie Powers to the victim. Meanwhile, Gerald Powers sat in custody, denying any involvement. When questioned, he claimed he had only heard about Shannon's case through news reports. He did admit to being at the casino the night she disappeared, but insisted he left early to check on a sick neighbor. But police weren't convinced. They spoke with that neighbor, an elderly woman living in Mississippi, who told investigators that Gerald hadn't been at her house at the time he claimed. Though her memory was a bit unclear due to illness, her statement only added to suspicions. At the same time, investigators turned back to the one person who might know the truth: Gerald's wife, Sharon. Initially, Sharon had been the one to tip off police about her husband, but since then, she'd become hesitant, walking back her statements. She seemed conflicted, torn between loyalty to her husband and concern over the disturbing possibility that he had done something unthinkable. At first, Sharon Powers hesitated to say more. Her emotions were tangled. She loved her husband, but deep down, she feared him. Over time, though, something shifted. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe it was a sense of justice for another mother, just like her, who never got the chance to come home. Eventually, Sharon opened up to Special Agent Jennifer Akin. She described Gerald as controlling and emotionally abusive. He demanded obedience and even used a small bell to summon her in the house. Despite his domineering ways, she had stayed with him for years, unsure how to leave. But now, she began sharing details only someone close to the killer would know. On the morning after the abduction, she said Gerald had returned home visibly anxious. He had a cut on his arm and blood on his T-shirt. When she asked about it, he brushed it off, saying he fell at the casino. But Sharon wasn't buying it. She also noticed that he seemed panicked, restless in a way she hadn't seen before. The deeper she dug into her memory, the more she revealed. Gerald had told her he got rid of the murder weapon by tossing it into a canal near the casino in Mississippi. Police sent divers into the water, searching every inch, but they found nothing. The current was too strong in certain spots, and recovery was impossible. Still, this tip reinforced Sharon's credibility. She knew things no one else could have. Then came another breakthrough. Sharon remembered Gerald telling her that he'd hidden Shannon's jewelry behind a local bar, underneath a couch. When police searched the area, they discovered a small bundle wrapped in aluminum foil. Inside were several rings and pieces of jewelry, wrapped in the same pink foil found in Sharon and Gerald's home kitchen. Laboratory analysis later confirmed that the foil wrapping the jewelry matched the roll from their home exactly. It was the first hard forensic link connecting Gerald to Shannon. And there was more. Back at the FBI lab, examiners analyzed fibers found in Gerald's car. One of them was a match for the fabric from the dress Shannon had worn the night she disappeared. That meant she had, without a doubt, been inside his vehicle. Investigators now had enough evidence to move forward. Gerald Lee Powers was formally charged with the kidnapping and murder of Shannon Sanderson. Though he never confessed and no co-conspirators were found, prosecutors were confident he acted alone. After following her from the casino, he abducted her, took her jewelry and money, and ended her life in cold blood. In court, the jury took only 15 minutes to reach a unanimous verdict. Guilty. He was sentenced to death and now sits on death row in a high-security prison in Tennessee, awaiting execution. Shannon's story is a reminder of how dangerous obsession and control can be, and how crucial it is to speak up when something feels wrong. Thanks to persistence, community tips, and one brave woman who found her voice, justice was finally served.